Hello there, and Jumbo. Welcome to the fourth episode of the RSM Insight, a podcast by RSM Eastern Africa. I'm Ashif Kassam, your host, and today we will be exploring an important and a timely topic, the role of accountants in driving national prosperity. Joining us for this conversation is CPA Professor Elizabeth Kalunda. Professor Kalunda is a distinguished financial professional and an academic leader serving as the 26th chair of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ICPAK, and she's the third female chair. She is an associate professor of finance at USIU Africa and serves on the IFAC Council, PAFA Board, and CASNEP Board. Professor Kalunda is a passionate mentor, deeply dedicated to capacity building and nurturing the next generation of finance leaders, particularly youth and women, focusing on an ethically governed future for Africa's financial landscape. Karibu, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Ashif, for inviting me in this podcast. I'm very delighted to just be among the first people in the podcast to discuss matters relating to Kenya. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Elizabeth, the reason we started this podcast is really to bring the truth about the opportunities in East Africa and how this, important region will shape, Africa's economics in time to come. With all the social media and everything that is there is a lot of news that is factual and there's a lot of news that is not factual. And to balance that is very critical, especially for businessmen and entrepreneurs, but also for professionals to understand where this region is moving. And that's really the reason of why we have this podcast. So to start with, one thing that really touched me is the way you describe yourself. And I'll repeat it again, as a passionate mentor, deeply dedicated to capacity building and nurturing the next generation of finance leaders, particularly the youth and women, focusing on building an ethically governed future for Africa's financial landscape. Tell me, what gives you this passion and drive?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And indeed, I'm passionate about the youth and women. Now, I'll start by saying that passion is something that actually cannot be borrowed. It's something that you have to live in. You have to live it. Now, my life experiences are the ones that have shaped my passion for the youth and young women. And I want to mention 3 things that actually speak to that. I started my career as a high school teacher, and I started the career in the depth of a place in the village, let me call it in Ukambani. And this gave me an opportunity to interact with women, to interact with the youth. And one thing that I noted is that there was a lot of underprivilege in the women who were there. I could see the women around the area, young in age, very entrepreneurial, doing businesses like selling water for us because that place had no tapped water. They were also selling food. I could see they had a lot of intelligence in them, but the society in a way had deprived them of the opportunity to be what they could fully be. And I just asked myself, supposing these women had money, supposing we had financial systems that could enable them to expand their businesses or even to take their children to school, that is one thing that really touched me. Again, at my place of work, I was teaching young people. It was a girls' school, so I was interacting a lot with youth who were girls, and I could see the poverty in some of them, and at the same time, I could see the potential. So this made me keep thinking, how can I help these young people, these young women? And I decided that I need to change my career. And that's where I changed my career from just being a teacher in home science to somebody who is a professional in accounting, because I believe that is the way or the route through which financial discussions are done, financial decisions, and I could help the youth. Again, now the other thing was, as I teach in the university, I see the potential and the hope that is with the students. And I see the transformation. Some of them came in as first-year students, maybe first-year master students, and now they sit in boards. So for me, that was something that really gave me the motivation. And I had that moral conviction that there's potential in everyone, and I had to sit there and drive that agenda. So that's why I still believe I'm passionate, and I cannot throw that passion away.
Okay, but just tell us your journey from being this teacher to moving to an accountant, being a member of ISPAC, and now being an associate professor. And I also understand you are very critical in driving the financial stability of USIU in your days as the deputy vice chancellor.
Yeah. So maybe for those who've not heard my story, my career was actually on a totally different path from where I am. I did a bachelor's of education in home science and technology, a subject that I really love. Actually, it has made me a better wife, a better mother. I make my clothes, I make good food at home. So this is something that I really am grateful for. But I felt like that's not the only thing I can do, because I was very good in mathematics. I was very passionate about the people I'd meet and see the gap that they have from a finance bit. So I taught in the school that I had been posted for almost 3 years, and then decided to look for a transfer. And the reason why I was looking for the transfer was not that the place was not good, but I wanted to get opportunities where I could study. So immediately I was granted the transfer. I started doing my CPAs. So, and that transformed my life. Actually, I normally say CPA was the game changer in my life. And since I really loved CPA, I gave it my best. I performed well. And I was actually a beneficiary of some of the awards that were given. And to be specific, was the Kasim Laka Award, because I was among the best students in Section 2. So after that, I decided now to completely change my trajectory in the teaching. I continued teaching, but I went further and did a master's in business administration, accounting option. And I was lucky because at that time I was working with TSE, and they were able to give me study leave. And that's something I really want to thank the government, giving people the opportunity to study and improve themselves. So after I finished my master's in accounting, I went further ahead and did my PhD. That's a doctor in philosophy in business administration. And then I took the banking option. And this is because I was so passionate about financial inclusion. And I said I need to study this deeply to just know what are these things that exclude women and even the youth, and basically the needy from getting the finances that they need to be able to improve their lives. So with that, I was able to change my job. I went to work at the university. I'm currently working at the USIU, where I also served as the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Finance and Operations. And I was glad that during my tenure, I was able to use my knowledge in finance, my knowledge in CPA, which is so broad, to run the different areas of operations in a university outside just the finance scope. Yeah, so that's in short my journey. And I would say it wasn't a journey that was easy. You can imagine changing from one career to another. We all know how CPA is so tough. So you can imagine I was married, I had young children, but I was still doing it. But the passion and the desire to see a change in the world is what drove me to change my
That's
career.
good. I think all the young upcoming accountants need to hear your story, and all the members of the institute need to hear your story. And I hope they will do through this podcast
Sure.
to understand the journey and your passion around what you're doing and taking up the mantle of the ISPAC and bringing some pretty good changes in how ISPAC is run. But let's move to the issue around the state of the accounting profession in East Africa. Okay, while we have a very clear framework provided by the East African Customs Union around how we should integrate, I don't know what is the state. What would you say is the state of the profession across the entire East Africa, and why is there no full integration despite this framework being there?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, Ashif. And I would say that as a member of council and also as the chairman of the institute, I've had the privilege of visiting all the East African countries and visiting them as a member of the institute. I've interacted with the different professional bodies. We call them the POAs there. And I've seen there's a lot of potential that as East Africans, if we come together, we can be able to achieve. Now, unfortunately, and looking at the paperwork that we have, especially on the East African community, a lot has been put there to enable that integration to be there. But it's quite unfortunate because whatever has been put down in writing is simply paperwork, but no implementation. And I can say this because even at the East African communities of professional accountancy organization, whenever we try to push on matters of having that seamless transition from one country to another, we always get challenges. And the reason why the challenges are there is that one, we find that our markets are small and each country wants to protect its own market. The other challenge that we find is that for you to practice in another country, you must also be registered in that country. So like, for example, if you are a CPA Kenya, if you want to work in Uganda, you must have the ICPAK, the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda. And it's easy, but it is not that easy. Again, looking at the political space, you find that the mobility of labor from one country to another is not as easy as it should have been. And I can say that why this is not possible, we need to look at it from a political perspective. Because if you look at the East African community, there are so many things that we wanted to integrate as a community. One was the currency. We still have different currencies. One was seamless entry from one country to another. But we can see that that is not within all the countries. Again, we are seeing a lot of protectionism, where recently you see maybe like a country like Tanzania, we start getting into some wars. So I think for me, if we are able to work with the political side of that, there'll be a lot of labor mobility. And I want to assure every accountant that the market is big for all, it's big and enough for all of us. So we don't need to really protect our borders as such, because we are united or unified in the profession. We do the same work. We can work together to even make a greater accountancy profession
How
in
do
East
we
Africa.
work together? Does ICPAK have a framework that it wants to use? And secondly, should we not work on the model of the coalition of the willing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Actually, at ICPAK, and this is with regards to the other East African countries, we have what we call the MRAs, Mutual Recognition Agreement. So they are there in writing. But in terms of the actualization, that's where the issue comes in. So we have the will, but when we look at the political aspects that are happening, or just the political noise that is there, that becomes a bit difficult. And each country has its own political or maybe policies that drive the country. And one important thing is that even looking at our budget, remember East Africa, we normally read our budgets at the same time. We need to harmonize our taxes, but they are not harmonized. So these things that are at the national level also affect our things at the professional level. But I just want to say that as a professionals and at ICPAK, being the largest professional body, we have been able to handhold other bodies like the Professional Institute in Rwanda. We are the ones who's established it. Also looking at Burundi, we call it the OPC Burundi. Kenya was very key in holding their hands, and right now they are actually members of IFAK, and they are associate members, but we really did a great thing. So I still believe that as accountants, we can start that. And we normally say even a bird builds the nest by just picking a small piece of the grass or the twigs that they are using. So as professionals, if we start, I'm sure it is going to trickle up to the whole country.
So I think for all the accountants in the region who hear to this podcast, I think while the institutes are doing their work, we also need to lobby that, if we are all integrated, it brings a much bigger pool of potential to the forefront. And I think that's one area that while you're doing your job, I think from the outside there has to also be that push to say this is good for the region and not specifically for the country. But when we come to the profession, okay, and looking at the profession in East Africa, what is the role that this profession is really doing to drive regional prosperity? And is this critical? Is it being measured? How do we see that, and what is the impact of this on regional prosperity?
Okay, now looking at the accountancy profession, this is a profession that is based on building public trust. And looking at matters relating to the economy, matters relating to investments, investors can only come to a country where they believe or there's trust in the figures that they are given. So I would say that the accountants play a very big role in making the region grow because one, they prepare the books, they audit the books, they do the valuations of businesses, and if they do it following the credo and the ethos that accountants should have, they are able to build public trust. The other thing is that as accountants, our role is to guard money. And we do this through the reporting and also through the assurance side of auditing. Now, if we are able to guard money, that is a clear channel in terms of how an economy can grow. The other one is that, and this is something that is yet to be done. If you look at Kenya, and I believe in the other East African countries, you'll note that the economy is driven by small businesses. And looking at the statistics, we say it's around 80 or 90% of the economy is driven by the SMEs. Now, the cost of offering professional services to majority of these SMEs is very high. So as accountants, if we are able to come up with custom-made products that we can give these small businesses to help them grow up, to make them viable for loans, there's a big role that we can do in trying to push the economy of the country. And then accountants, we are the ones who speak when it comes to tax systems. And I can say that because we, during the recent reading of the budget, ICPAK was very instrumental. We were in all the media houses. We had discussions with the CS in terms of what a good tax system should be. So as accountants, our role is to ensure that countries are able to run because revenue is there. And on the other side, to ensure that the expenses are actually spent following all the, maybe the requirements from an audit perspective, from a system compliance point of view. Yeah, so indeed, accountants have a big role to play. I'd say that we are not doing it 100%. We have room to do that. And it's only through that that our voice as professionals can be heard and can be respected so that whatever we say is going to be put in policy and also going to be honored by those who are sitting in those offices.
But if we look at the role you're saying accountants should play, but there is a gap. How do you bridge that gap? What are the 2 or 3 things that the institute is, telling the accountants to do? One, you talked about the SME gap.
Yes.
And how do we empower SMEs? Is there a program that the institute has through which accountants can help SME build capacity?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm very proud to say that at ICPAK, we have devolved our services. We have branches, and these are the branches that we have 9 branches, let me put it that way. These branches are formed following the previous provinces that we had. The reason why we had branches was to follow the devolution concept, where we are saying accountancy as a profession might not reach everybody if we are all headquartered in Nairobi. So we came up with branches, and one of the role of branches is to go to the grassroots, get SMEs, tell them what accountants do, tell them the importance of doing bookkeeping, and even offer free services. And I'm happy that during my tenure as a council member and also as the chairman, we've been able to visit various branches, talk to the traders there. Specifically, we've been to Samburu, where we had meetings with the SMEs, telling them the importance of bookkeeping, telling them where they can get good auditors, because we noted most of them had tax issues because they had let me call them quack accountants who, put them into problems with the taxman. So there's a lot that we are doing. And we have actually if you look at one of our strategic plans is to ensure that we support the SMEs. So our intention is to ensure that every SMEs can be able to afford the accountancy services, so that they and we map them together with we work together sometimes with KRA to have things that we call KRA Kijijini. I'm not sure of the term, but it is actually it's mashinani. Yeah, so there's a lot that we are doing, and we need to maybe do it more. We need to shout more about it so that all the businesses can know. Yeah.
I think, KRA, and I was on the board till last Friday. And, there is this program called Ushuru Mashinani,
Yes.
which is how do you reach the taxpayers at the ground level. But one critical part is the development of tools that SMEs can use. Okay, because the issue is having a full-time accountant or others is always challenging. One thing that I don't see East Africa doing is what is the tax framework for SMEs? Because as I see, there is the micro, then you grow into a small, and then you grow into a medium. And technically, a medium organization in Kenya is still not large, or is not
Yeah.
even small in the global context. Okay, but the tools that are there to help them grow is becoming very difficult, and also issues around tools that the banks can use to assess them. Okay, currently there is no tools, and the issue is SMEs will not be able to have a full set of accounting records. Is this something that ISPAC and the other institutes, ISPAO, NBAA, should be looking at, working with the tax to develop a tax or a SME framework that helps them build capacity, and as they grow to the next level, then it's easier for them even to have the affordability question coming in.
Yes, actually, that's something that we need to look into, and at ISPAC we've made some strides. And how we are doing this is that anytime when we visit the branches, because the branches are made up of a number of county governments, we normally visit the county head, who is the governor. We have an MOU, and in one of the clauses there is to support the SMEs in that area. So how does our support coming? One, in terms of financial literacy, we try to educate the traders in that area. And one thing that we've noted, and that's something that cuts across the country, there are a lot of funds that are released, but there's no follow-up, there's no accountability from a point of have you de-risked the person so that they know how to use the funds. So as ISPAC, we are trying to work with the county governments to ensure that the traders who receive those funds, one, they know how business should be run. We help them in record keeping. And as one of the things that is also involved in the MOU with the county governments is we offer pro bono services. Now, the pro bono services have not gone, it has not grown so much because, again, we are restricted in terms of numbers, especially at the mashinani. But that is something that we want to come up with a clear framework of how do we offer the pro bono services, how do we scale up these businesses, what tools should they have, can we partner with banks as the lending institutions, or if there are donors that are lending directly to the county governments, how can they work with this? Because if we are able to tie those threads around that, you can see there'll be a lot of flow of revenue to the government through KRA from the businesses, and also the businesses will be able to grow so that if you look at most of the businesses we have, it's the micro, and then we go to we have the micro SMEs, and then we go to the slightly bigger ones, all the way to big farms. So we are seeing that there's a gap there. So we are hoping that we are going to come up with a very clear framework. Whatever we have, we are piloting in some counties. I know we've done one and on a pilot basis in Nyahururu County. So this is something that we are doing. And as maybe members of the public, when they watch this, my appeal would be to the governors to ensure that these MOUs that we have with them, they actually implement them, because having something in paper and not actually going further and implementing it is as good as not having it. Yeah.
Okay. We looked at the profession. You even said, and used the word quack auditors. Okay. What are the challenges facing this profession? And, how is the Institute dealing with those challenges?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Now, just like any profession, we can't miss challenges. But I would want to just support what I'll say with there's an African saying that says that a broken rib cannot kill an elephant. It will still survive. So these challenges will always be there. So we need to identify which is this broken rib and what can we do. Now, the challenges that we are having is that we have accountants who are not registered to practice as auditors, but they have the accounting knowledge, but they go outside and purport that they are accountants. Now, since they have to sign the books, they end up stealing signatures of accountants who are qualified. And I'm very happy because for now we have a number that we call the unique document identification number, which is able to match every qualified opinion with a specific auditor. And the quacks now are not able to steal that number. And recently we had banks that now are calling the institute or even calling the practitioners and asking them, are you the one who went through these books? Did you prepare these books? And the auditors actually saying they are not. So the unique, the UDIN number is really helping. So we have that challenge of quacks. Another challenge that we are having is that the accountancy profession, unfortunately, we don't have what we call the remuneration order. This is what helps accountants to price their jobs. So currently what is happening, there's a lot of undercutting that you'll find that a job that should be done for X amount is actually being done for half of the X amount. And definitely, if you don't have enough finances to do a certain job, definitely you'll compromise on the quality. So this again adds to the issue of quacks. Now, the other issue that we are having in the profession, which is probably not related to the quack, but it's a challenge that we are having, is where we are finding that even the pay that the accountants are getting is much less compared to the work that they do and even the studies that they went through. So you find that accountants, unfortunately, as human beings, get tempted to get into corruption-related matters. But this is not something that I would excuse in saying that there's no man. As accountants, we have to be members who follow the code of ethics, and we have to have integrity in the core of everything that we do. So those are some of the challenges. And then the other challenge I would just want to mention is that if you look at the numbers of accountants that we have produced in the country vis-a-vis the jobs that are there, I can say that the accountants are more than the opportunities that are there. And this now brings in the issue of discouragement and even maybe having less numbers of accountants who are now registering as CPAs. The other issue that, and this is something that we need to look at a global level and even from a training level, is that we find that with the changes in technology and the emergence of new competencies like data analytics, we find that there are people who are encroaching into the profession of accounting. But that does not mean that our ribs are broken or we are going to die, but we also need to improve on our curriculum so that an accountant, besides having the accountancy skills, can also have the data analytics skills. Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting point you brought up. I think the role of accountants will evolve. Okay, the basic input of data, basic analysis can now be done in a very structured manner. Okay, it is the next phase is going to be how do you interpret and how do you add value, and if adding value can only come with training, but it also comes with exposure. And at the moment, a lot of the accountants are only, doing one type of service, by and large, which is auditing. Majority of the income still comes from auditing.
Yes.
And the issue is auditing is reading history rather than writing history.
Yeah.
And what is the institute doing to ensure, that people are diversifying their skills into other areas?
Yeah. Now, what we are doing as an institute, and this starts with our relationship with CASNEB, is how can we improve the curriculum of the accountants? Because looking at how Kenya is structured, we have CASNEB, which is the examiner and the trainer, and then we have now ICPAK that has the already qualified accountants. So what we do as ICPAK and our role in advising CASNEB, whenever we find that there are these new skills that accountants need to perform better, we always give recommendations to CASNEB in terms of enhancement of the curriculum. And I'm happy that this year CASNEB will be actually coming up with a new curriculum, and I'm hoping that you'll be part of the stakeholders who will be just giving us the validations and the things that we want to improve, because I know you've been in the profession for years and you can see the gaps that are there. The other thing that we are doing as ICPAK is on the CPD. This is the Continuous Professional Development Training. we've noted that there are some skills that are very critical, but they were not there when the accountants were training, and especially those who trained some years back. So we have certification courses that are not so specific in the accounting field, but in other areas, which we are encouraging our members to take part in. We have trainings on sustainability. This is something that is really coming up, and accountants, we need to report about the climate. We are also having other trainings, and even maybe when it comes to issues ethics, because this is something that is a soft issue, but it really affects the accountants. So we are looking at what are these new skills that are needed. And just before I finish on CASNEB, previously I talked about data analytics. Now, looking at the CASNEB curriculum, they have introduced a new course, which is the business data analytics, because we see these are important skills. So as accountants and as ICPAK, we have come up with multiple licenses. Years back, we had only one practicing license, which was for assurance. And that's why you'll find most of the accountants are in the audit space. But now we are in a multi-license regime. We have accountants who can do consultancy services, so there's a license for that. We have those who can do issues of internal audit only. So we are really also trying as a profession to come up with different areas, and we ensure that there are trainings that are given to these members, which are mandatory, so that they can be able to play their roles in the different areas of the accounting space. Yeah.
One interesting thing, Elizabeth, is the issue around a qualification that the Auditor General says that the accountants have, but ICPAK doesn't issue that qualification, and that is a certificate in making 1 + 1 11. and we read all these stories. So every time the Auditor General is picking something, there's somebody who has done a new curriculum maths of 1 plus. What is the institute doing to prevent this? Because every time that happens, there is an expectation gap. And that expectation gap just keeps on growing between what people expect the accountants to do vis-a-vis what the social media carries the story of what the accountants are really doing.
Yeah, actually, it's quite unfortunate that we are having that new mathematics that is not adding up, where 1 + 1 becomes 11 or even another figure. Yeah, so what is currently happening is that yes, we know that there's infiltration of unscrupulous accountants of people in our profession, but looking at the root cause, and this is actually just coming from what comes from the Auditor General, is that we find that some accountants operate in a very intimidating environment, very hostile, where they are forced to make sure 1 + 1 is 11 or even 12 and not 2. But as an institute, what are we doing? Now, as an institute, what we are doing is that we are empowering our two agencies, our two bodies, which are independent bodies. This is the disciplinary committee that now takes action against accountants who do not comply with the expectations of what they're supposed to do. We also have the Registration and Quality Assurance Committee, which when they do their quality reviews, they can actually be able to say that this accountant or this auditor has not done what he's supposed to do. So soon you'll be hearing about what we are doing from those sides, especially the disciplinary committee. And then the other thing that we find that is quite unfavorable in terms of maybe the way accountants are doing their role, you find that there are so many changes that are coming in. There's a lot of automation, and there are gaps within some of the professionals. And that's where maybe we find that some of the issues that are not right are done through a system, which accountants, unfortunately, some of them might not be able to have the skills to do that. Yeah.
So I think it's a technology gap, that needs to be addressed. Okay, but technology also brings opportunities.
Yes.
How are we selling this opportunities to our people? And where is the alignment, and what is the competition that we are now facing from other professions?
Okay, now I would say that the competition that is there is one. As accountants, we have to be tech savvy. And this is something that all accountants should do. And technology is here with us. We have AI, we have automated systems that we have cloud-based accounting and all that. So what we need to tell accountants, and I also being one of them, is that whenever the winds are strong and pushing us to a certain direction, let's accept that we cannot change the wind, but we can change the sails. So let us move with the technology. Let us know that there's a lifelong learning. So let us be ready to learn so that we can be able to know what is there. But then there's something that you had mentioned about the expectation gap. And this is something that relates to what do the public expect accountants to do. And sometimes when we hear the Auditor General's report where maybe there are some inconsistencies in the figure, the public expect that auditors are forensic investigators, or they are forensic auditors or investigators. So it is good to know that the role of an auditor is to give reasonable assurance, and sometimes auditors give opinions that actually say there's some doubt, but members of the public don't understand how to read this. So as a profession, we need to try and come up with simple language to actually explain what these financials mean, what an auditor's report mean. And I'm happy because when it comes to the Auditor General, she really tries, her office tries to simplify this by having the citizen account. I think they're called citizen budgets or citizen discussions. The other thing that as an institute we are doing to just remove that expectation gap and to support the office of the Auditor General is that we have been analyzing for the last 3 years the reports that the Auditor General gives. We've done that at the counties, the ministries, and the MDAs, and we are publishing those reports to just show this is how the trend has been. Every year we are getting reports about misappropriation of funds, lack of records. So we want to publicize this information and work together with the legislator to ensure that there's a law that is going to be put in the PFM Act to ensure that recommendations that are given by the Auditor General are supposed to be implemented. So those are some of the reforms that we are trying to do to just bring back the issue of the public interest and also to support on prudent use of our public resources. Yeah.
You talked about this issue of high pressure environment where accountants worked, and sometimes they are part of a system that forces you to do certain things. Is this trend increasing or is it decreasing?
Now, I would look at it on two sides because one, there are those accountants who, when they're put under pressure, they unfortunately yield in because they have to look at where will I get bread for my family. But there's this other group of accountants who say no and they whistleblow to the institute. So at the institute, I can say that we are getting quite a number of those instances reported, and we have a whistleblowing policy. And then also when we did write, because after we saw this Auditor General's report, especially coming relating to county governments, we said that as an institute, these books are prepared by our members. So we wrote to the members, accountants who are preparing these books, and the kind of information they were giving us, they were actually, majority was saying that the environment is very intimidating, they cannot do much, and there's nowhere they can go. So we are trying to talk to the governors through the Council of Governors to just tell them the importance of of following the right procedures and not making work so hard for our accountants. So I can say the trend is improving because of the knowledge that we are giving in terms of reducing that, but there's a lot of resistance in that.
That's a big challenge because if that's not addressed, then the whole issue of the expectation gap, grows. And I think the other problem is with social media is only the bad things are reported, not the good ones. Okay, and those bad things then get their own life, snowball into a big story when it might not be a big story.
Yeah, sure.
But I think it's an important point of how we bridge that gap, around the working. But in terms of, we talked about the profession, okay, and the gaps that it needs to fill, and we talked about technology.
Yeah.
But one critical issue that I see is the issue of ethics and integrity. Okay, we see it on all billboards, but I don't see ethics and integrity, taught from the grassroots level.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, that's one challenge. And how do we get this to be taught at the grassroots level so that it becomes part of your culture? Okay, because your values are values unless you live them. And the problem in Kenya is, we are not seeing, or in East Africa, it's not only a Kenya issue, it's an East African issue, that, those values are not transforming into culture. What can be done to actually drive that from a very young age, and how is ISPAC and other bodies engaging with the government to change the syllabus, at the ground level rather than at the university or professional level?
Yeah, actually, that's something that is really contributing to the big problem of corruption that we have in the country. Because looking at the traditional setup, children were taught ethics at home. They were taught the culture. They were taught the good and wrong when they were quite young. But looking at the family dynamics and the changes that have been there, most of the issues relating to good and bad have been left to the school. Now, I recall when I was in school, we used to do a course, a subject that was called social education and ethics. And it was a very good topic because I remember one of the topics, that was many years ago, it was like, what are the ethics of work? Where, why should you work? What should you do when you're working? And all this. So if we can have a curriculum change at the primary school level, even with the competency-based education, that can go a long, long way, because I feel like parents have neglected that role to the schools. And this can also be attributed to the change, what we are seeing, schools getting banned. Now, as a profession, what are we doing? We noted that was a key issue, and those students who are currently doing CPAs, after they finish, they must do a course actually there's a workshop on ethics that they must do. So that is trying to still instill, but it's still at a later age, because we normally say you cannot bend a tree when it is old. You have to bend it when it is young. So we still need to go back there. But all is still not lost. And even at ISPAK, we have mandatory ethic courses that every CPA must do. And they must do it before they are actually able to proceed to the next either to get their license or just to be registered. So ethics starts at the home, and that's where the rain started beating us. Yeah.
I think all the parents listening to this podcast, the key message from the chairman of ISPAC is that charity begins at home. Sure. If you're going to farm out the teaching of ethics at school, but you are not living that culture at home, your children will not learn it from school. Exactly. They'll learn it from home.
Yes.
And the second, critical part is that, if you're going to go to the church or to a prayer house to socialize, your children will also learn how to go there to socialize rather than actually following that
Exactly.
faith. So I think that's becoming a critical aspect around, and I think it's a very valid point that, we are not actually practicing what we are preaching, and our children learn from us.
Exactly.
And if we preach the wrong things, we practice it differently, that's what they learn.
Sure.
But that's a critical part.
Yeah.
In terms of if you were to look at overall, coming back to the topic of accountants, in driving regional prosperity. Okay, we are doing what we are doing, which was historic. Okay, what are your concluding remarks on how should accountants change to scale up regional prosperity? Because we are growing, but we are not growing as fast. Okay, we are growing at 5-7% across the region. Yet we have a lot of opportunities, and not only accountants, the professions and the roles they are playing. What do you see the change in that mindset that needs to come in?
Yeah. So a number of things that can help to just bring back the glory of the profession and also regionally is that I'm happy that we have one standard, because all of us use the same IFRSs. So that is one important thing that we are doing.
The only thing is if you understand it.
Yeah, if we understand it, let me put it that way. So the next best thing would be, why can we harmonize our curriculum for CPA across the East African region? Because we are learning about the same standards. Maybe the small differences would be on the issues of the tax laws. But I believe that we can harmonize the syllabus so that we have like a regional stream which now is able to fit into the international stream. Another way to ensure that the profession gets back the glory that it has and it's able to serve the public interest, we need to come up with a framework for supporting the small businesses. Because if you look at our East African region, our economy is supported a lot by these small businesses, but we tend to shun them and look at the big businesses that are out there. So if we have that mindset that we can build the small businesses so that they can be big, I think that's something that can really improve our space as accountants in the region. Another one is we must embrace technology in our training. Now, this can be done with the changes in the curriculum or continuously bringing in technology, because I've seen that by the time an accountant qualifies to be a CPA in any of the regions, by the time you qualify, there are so many things that have changed that you had not learned. So you get into the market when you are qualified, but you are not ripe for the market. So let's continue engaging in that. And something that is very critical for me is that there are so many decision makers in any country, and for those decisions to be sound decisions, we must always have an accountant at the table. And looking at sitting at the institute, I know there are so many organizations that have a seat for accountants, but in their boards. But we find that those positions are actually not given to accountants. They are given to anybody who has knowledge in accounting and finance. And so long as you have done a course in accounting, even a basic accounting, that is considered as you have that expertise. But that position should actually be meant for accountants, because we are able to understand figures. We are able to look at things from different lenses. So if we are given an opportunity to sit at those decision-making tables, those policy-making tables, we can be able to come up with policies that can drive the regional integration, they can drive the regional economy, and they can bring back the glory to the profession of accountancy.
Elizabeth, if you had one parting shot for the country and one parting shot for your professional accountants, what would those be?
My parting shot would be accountancy is a profession that is built on the technical side and also the soft side of integrity. The two are inseparable. What we are seeing is that we are having accountants who are technically sound, but from an integrity side, they are not sound. So let us come back together as accountants to our table, and let us not separate those two, because public interest is what we are supposed to drive, and that's what we should be seeing we are doing. Thank you.
In fact, that's the biggest contribution to the country. But also, there's the other part that you have the integrity, but you don't have the competence. Okay, and so you need to put in the time. If you're just going to attend CPDs to take,
exactly.
If you're not going to invest in yourselves, nobody's going to invest for you.
Totally.
Okay, so I think that's a critical, aspect, that it's a mind shift.
Yeah.
Okay, that accountants need to look into. But even at the country level, I think the critical part is the issue around how we drive this change, okay, and making sure that the change focuses on the SME, because the SME is a very big component, and unless we help them grow, then the country will grow. So I think that's a very critical point. But when we release this podcast, I think viewers, there are a number of points that the chairman of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants has told us, that things are changing, curriculum is changing, there is going to be input required. So one is that when these papers come out, please do go out and give your comments. But also in the chat, when you see this, give us your comments, your insights, and we will share this with the institutes in all the 3 countries, so they are able to take input from that and see what are the challenges that you either as professionals are facing, what are the challenges you who are in enterprise are facing when dealing with professionals. But overall, what is the mind shift change that we need to make to drive this country forward? Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for coming, and it was really a pleasure having you and having a chat with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and also the kudos for this good job you're doing of having this podcast. I'm sure whatever we are discussing here is going to go miles and miles away. And the intention, as you had said, is to ensure that there's regional integration, there's growth in the economy, and also the profession should be doing what they are meant to do. Thank you.
Good. So if you enjoy this broadcast, please like it, share it, and give us your feedback. And see you on the next episode. And have a great time till then. Bye.